an attack on religion or thinking of religion as something very negative or bad, a terrible thing, then I think I haven't come across at all. Right? The point is not about religion as good or bad, secular as good as bad, as I think is becoming clear more and more through the in course, as the course proceeds. That's that 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 it is actually an invitation to all of you and to myself to reflect on what things or concepts or ideas that we think we know, and we think that we know, and they are so self-evident that we never stop to reflect. Right? So I thought it was that, what do we mean by religion? What do we mean by secular? I wanted to say that first. So if it has conveyed a wrong impression, then I'm sorry. It hasn't. Thank you. But that is what it's a call for. To just ask that, do we really know what is religion when we say, use the word so easily? And do we really know what it means to be secular, or when we use the word? Oh, there she is. I was referring to a comment of yours. I was saying that if I've conveyed the wrong impression that religion is really negative, then I'm sorry, but it's not, as you have made out. You said it yourself, that it's a call to think about what is religion, that we ask ourselves what religion means before we use it as if it's a self-evident category which will carry the same meaning to everyone, right? The same with secular. So having said that, as I said, today is the first session. This session is the first one I've done, even without my notes. Yes, Abhishek.
Yes, I think I should have mentioned it in the last session, but since we were like, it was already spilled, I thought I could maybe.
Yeah, please.
Speaking to some of your concerns that you are raising now, I was just wondering if you could bring up that very famous interview. I mean, since you are a student of Gautam Bhadra, which I never knew. Something that I discovered. I think it would be wonderful if you could bring up that famous interview that Bhadra gave in the very little magazine Naya, 93, understandably after the Babri issue. And he had a very nuanced understanding of secularism, where he said that it's got nothing to. I mean, when we are discussing then the Pilgrami and all of that, like secular science, what is it to practice secular science? And then Sumit Sarkar, Tanika Sarkar, Nila Sarkar wrote a very nasty rejoinder. And that immediately, it was a very big in the Bengali intellectual circuit.
Absolutely.
And I once wanted to translate it. Unfortunately, I couldn't because of the very nuanced Bengali vocabulary. But I think that's a very powerful interview.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much. But you got me a little unawares because, of course, I read and engaged with it because it was Gautama, and but it was 93. And we are in 2017. So I'll try and recollect. If you remember it better, just fill in the details. But that's precisely the point, what I was saying, that the idea is, not that he said that then in these words, but the idea is before we just pronounce, before we just think we know what, religion and secularism are and pronounce on both, I think we need to first think what we mean, ask ourselves, do we really know what we mean? Or when we use these terms, like as throwaway statements, right? What do we mean? Now, the problem, the entire controversy around Gautam Bhadra, first of all, it was a student of his who ran this quote unquote absolutely marginal and journal which no one knew about. And the other thing was that the questions that were put also, I thought, were really, not the right kind of questions. But in reacting to those questions, he said certain things which were extremely nuanced, but somehow the student then, in order to draw attention, sent it to various people. Okay? Sent it to various people. And in that, what happened when I said that people got Nandi wrong, I mean, this happens constantly. And this is precisely my, my rejoinder, or not rejoinder, my call for caution and my call to, ourselves to first think, before we react, right? Not come up with knee-jerk reactions. Not just that, think before we even, say that we know what religion is or what sort of secular is or that religion is good or bad, And if this connects to my own work, Gautam Bhadra was then, given the charged situation of the time, he was saying that the secular historians, I don't know how many of you followed it because you are young, there was a long kind of debate from the, among the JNU historians and let's say other people, various shades who felt that they knew the actual history of, let's say, Ram Janmabhoomi, right? So what the JNU historians were doing, trying to do, were, pointing out the fallacies, that this is not true, that is not true, etc., etc., etc. But they also had this somehow, given the context of the time, this notion, which I heard in, Kumkum Sangari very recently in Germany, that, somehow we have to save the secular. No, but we have to, given what is going on. I would never say that. I was raising, which is why Bill Gramy made so much sense when I read him again. And let's first ask ourselves, what is this secular we have to save, that we are willing to die for, just as what is this religion that we are willing to die for, right? We don't ask ourselves these questions. So that is what Gautam Bhadra was pointing to. This notion of the secular, precisely that, religion is something not good, and therefore, you want to wish it away, as if it does not, because you think it's not good, or let's say it's Nehru's idea that with, education and spirit of science, caste will disappear automatically, doesn't make them disappear. So he was pointing to the fact that precisely that, not just the JNU historians, but all of us have to ask ourselves why, some idea of faith or religion continues to play such important roles in many people's lives. So that's what he was saying, that just because it doesn't matter to you does not mean that it doesn't matter to anyone. And not just that, that is, the easy step. The second step is you have to, look carefully and see that it actually matters to a whole lot of people. Right. So having started on that premise that it does matter to a whole lot of people, some sense of the religious or some sense of faith or some sense of even the transcendent, that is important in our lives, then how do we come up with a notion of the secular that takes into account that, as I said, that a very vague but a very pervasive sense of religion still plays a very, very important role in many big people's lives. So when he said that, as in the charged context of the moment, again, which is absurd, he was actually very hurt. He was extremely hurt because he said, Niladri, Bhattacharya, Shubin Sharkar, Tonika Sharkar, they know each other very well, right? So to this long, and I wouldn't say it was a particularly brilliant interview because, as I said, the questions I don't think were great, and we also thought that we'll write something. This will tell you how, people were, how agitated, let's say, or involved historians were then. They sent I think a 10-page, single-space written rejoinder in English. Okay. So now Gautam Bhadra's point was that I'm not at all, upset just with the criticism. What I'm upset about is that one, they haven't read the text very carefully, and two, all of them know me very well personally. So rather than writing, instead of just going in for this long written rejoinder, which is why it became important, because I said it was a journal which probably had a circulation of 50 at the most. Huh? So really, no one knew of that magazine. It's a tiny magazine, yeah. So why didn't they get to me? Why didn't they write to me straight and ask me what I meant when I was saying those things? You see, again, when I've insisted again and again on the need for dialogue, on the need for common ground, on the need to try and first engage with and understand each other before we first dismiss. Before we first dismiss. And this, how does this relate to my work? It relates to my work in a different way. When I started, decided to work and with Gautam Bhatta, he was among the very few, except from for David Hardiman, if you remember him. Nobody remembers him as a part of subaltern studies, but he's always been a very kind of, not just diligent, very, yes, committed subaltern studies historian. Except for him and Gautam Bhatta's work on Islam, but most of it is published in Bengali, which is why he's not as well known, but his work is of supreme importance. Okay? He said that somehow subaltern studies, many of them, as you know, some were even Maoists in the sense they were very thoroughly influenced by the Naxalite movement, the younger generation, but certainly with leftist training. He said, not in so many words, and I was too young to understand it. He said somehow, we have, and not just we, us Marxist historians, we somehow have not engaged properly, precisely with this importance of the religious in the lives of many. Right? So this is also something he was saying in the interview. And he told me and other friends, so he said, you should look at, let's say religious, even if look at religions, new ones, old ones, but the ones that mean something to people, particularly new ones. Why are these people taking to? Because the other thing, when we spoke about conversion, and I was insisting on the mix-ups, all these, let's say, when people get initiated into Mohima Dharma, although it's coming out claiming it's a dharma, new dharma, Kumbi Putya or whatever, Oleg dharma. It's a dharma. It's a separate, dharma in that sense. It's never taken as a part of conversion. Why? Right? So he didn't ask me those questions, but I'm saying that he said that let's look into what make people suddenly feel that whatever they have by way of, they think, as shelter or faith or trust is not working, so that they're looking for something new. But the fact remains that a notion of the religious is extremely important for the lives of many. And he was critical of the secular historians for not paying attention to that fact. Right? So the same reaction was, I mean, I spoke to them later. Now they've all made up and it's all fine, but it's been several years. But, how could Gautam say things like that in the current context? Doesn't he realize what's happening? And his point was precisely in order to realize what is happening, we have to pay very serious attention. People think, religion is at stake, or, their faith is at stake, and they're willing to die for it and kill for it. We shouldn't forget that. So that was his point, that, if we just try to wish that away, then there is no engagement, real engagement with what is happening, something that Bilgami is saying in a very different way. Now I think, now that I read. So thank you, Atik. So his idea was that, pay attention to religion. We took it, of course, as, let's say, enthusiastic youngsters, that's the, let's say, the exuberance of youth. We said, okay, we'll do religion as a form of resistance. If you want the history of, let's say, we were called the third generation, although we've never been a part of subaltern studies because they didn't want to become a school. But we were influenced by them. And, Ajay Skaria, Saurav, we all worked on religion as resistance, right? Which was, again, a very romantic notion then. But we thought, yes, we have to pay attention to religion, which can also be a form of, articulating resistance. That's how we began. But the point was that, that we have to take very seriously the fact that something called the religious is extremely important in the lives of many. Does that, yes? Okay. If you would like to add something, Abhishek?
No, this is good. I mean, thank you for bringing this up.
No, thanks for bringing this up so that I could mention. So, That's how, not I mentioned three because we remained very good friends, but there were others. But this idea of, let's take up or let's extend the impulse of subaltern studies in a different direction by looking at, religion, and hence we all selected, let's say, marginal groups, marginal faiths, marginal orders. And then for me, the Puri book, which seems to have so much importance here, was a move back from, let's say, the periphery to the center, because it was the same idea that if I look at one, the story is not really complete if I do not look at the other side. Because what I understood in the course of my work was that it's not, that's how we think. It's anti-Jagannath. Why? Because some followers of my mother actually got into the temple of Jagannath extremely marginal, and they wouldn't have got entry unless they had forced their way into it from the Sambalpur region. I mean, just think of the distance they covered. It's a huge distance. So they moved into the temple of Jagannath in March 1881, saying, with cries of Alek, 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 and they said that they have come there. They're openly saying they've come there to drag out and burn the images of the Jagannath Trinity. Okay. Now, obviously, they are caught, and their leader falls on and they enter with rice. They enter with cooked rice, and they enter after they have eaten. Okay. So these are obviously when I read it first, I thought this is a deliberate contravention of the temple norms. Later, I thought that these people were so far removed they didn't even know about the temple rules. Probably they had eaten because they were hungry, or both. But they're openly saying we've come to burn Jagannath. But why burn Jagannath? Because there is a belief, not that they read the texts of Vibha, but these were compositions which were sung. In one of Vibha's compositions, it's clearly said that once this Mahima Swami or the avatar appears, Jagannath, who has, kind of accumulated a lot of sin, by becoming, embodied in an idol in Kali Yuga, he leaves the image and comes out to become Mahima Swami's first disciple. So they've come to burn, drag out and burn the images to show that there is no life, that Jagannath is not there. So it's not anti-Jagannath in that sense. As I said, it took me many years because I started out, what a thing to start on, like an attack on the temple of Jagannath, but by an extremely, marginal group of people, men, women, children. Okay, and coming all the way from Sambalpur, the Sambalpur region, that western part of Odisha. But that's what they were saying, that because Jagannath has left, but people do not know it because the idol remains so important. If we burn it, then people will realize. So, and true faith will then be able to spread. So, as I said, as you work, the nuances become clear because the first reports I read were anti-Jagannath. Yes, it is anti-Jagannath, obviously, because it's a totally different understanding of Jagannath. Try and tell any Jagannath devotee that, that this is just an image and he's left and become Mahima Swami's first disciple, right? Govinda Das. So that's how I started. And precisely because of that, for the postdoc, when Prasad Grewal invited me to join the Religious Networks project, and it was a major project run for several years, run by the Indian Institute of Advanced Study on religious networks, but also centers, sites. So he says, you work on Orissa, so why don't you work on Puri? So, where he kind of pushed me to work on Puri. And that's my move back to Jagannath. And again, as I said, at that age, I did not think of it this way. But having done both, now I realize, what it means to see it from both sides. So good that you brought all this up. But that was my point. Do we really know what religion means? And not just what it means, not religion or the secular. How do they become important in people's lives? You can never generalize there. The way we say, I think, I am secular may be very different from the way even Abhishek thinks he's secular. You see which is why so many arguments, why has Ashish Nandi suddenly become, very religious, right? Or why, how is it possible that Gautam Bhadra, who's done, such detailed and very, very good work on the Mughal state and later on Islam, how can he say that, secular historians are bad or wrong? What he was saying is precisely this, that there seems to be a certain inability on their part to take into account the fact that the religious matters, very seriously in many people's lives. And if you start on the premise that it's bad and we shouldn't take it into consideration, then you cannot go anywhere. So yes, thanks, Abhishek. Now your comments. I'll give a bit about how I came to this project also, when it was on an invitation. Rajni Kothari, mind you, was a very senior and a very serious, so again, who kind of thought seriously of the problem of religion, the coming together of religion and politics. Sociologist who was also at the Center for Studies in Developing Societies in Delhi for years and years, very, very serious. And the other thing I want to mention, the context, before I move into my particular work, is that the first round of debates actually take place around whether, caste is religious or caste is political, or caste should be confined just to Hinduism, or whether it should be allowed to come into the arena of politics, etc., actually takes place in the wake of what? The appointment of the first Backward Classes Commission, we forget that, and the way, I mentioned it in my introduction, and the way it kind of restructures relations among several groups in North India. Okay, so it's after the report is submitted, which is shelved, etc., but that doesn't matter whether the report is implemented or the report is read by anybody. It has already reorganized, relations amongst various groups in the north. As I mentioned, as several others, and I follow other sociologists, of course, that the Kisan politics and caste politics come together in very new ways. Okay, so Rajni Kothari, the first round of debate is taking place in the late 60s, precisely on whether caste is good or bad for Indian democracy. And that's why this book is published in 1970s. Essay, I've given you an article, but he has an edited volume if any of you are interested on caste in politics. So it will give you the early reflections of good sociologists and anthropologists on caste and how caste bears upon Indian democracy, the presence of caste. So when I was asked to propose a theme, I was invited again by Oxford University Press to propose a theme for their Themes in Indian History series, because the idea of Themes in Indian History is that you pick up themes that are very topical and that remain very important and debated, and you put together old, new, but very important writings which people don't get to read or not, don't think it's important. So again, I had to work a lot, because you can imagine the amount of writing there is on caste. It was like the work of another book of my own, absolutely. The amount I had to read just to select first and then to write the introduction, right? To understand, I'm not a sociologist. But my point again was, because I had read, Asad and many others, and having worked with Gautam Bhadra and many, many others, that the problem is, again, caste is taken to be, even by very good anthropologists and sociologists, as an identifiable category with some, essential characters and norms. Not that it doesn't have it. Caste, of course, certainly has it. But but this attention to what constitutes caste and how it functions somehow misses out on the fact of its constant mutations. Right. So that is why I said I'll do caste in history, precisely to show that it's not something static, given for life. Yes, it is given for life. You're born into a caste, but that does not mean that it's not dynamic at all. That there have been constant changes, and we know it in the way caste politics is changing in front of our eyes almost every day. It's not, that you have to look very far. So that was my idea of proposing caste in history. And I'll give you a funny anecdote. Rasamadan, who happens to be my father-in-law was dead by then, but my mother-in-law was very much alive. So he used to go and visit her from time to time. So this I got from her much later. Of course, she didn't tell me that. She says, your daughter-in-law, jokingly, of course, he always calls me Shita. So he says, your daughter, and this is not in my presence after the book comes out, your daughter-in-law has proposed a book to exclude you and me. so, so the way you think, and then after I heard it several years later, I call him Dadu. I said, but Dadu, it was precisely the point that, anthropologists and sociologists have worked so much on caste that there was a neglect of very good studies that had also approached caste from different angles. Of course, he was joking, but even, just to come over for tea, and this is the conversation they have, no? That your daughter-in-law proposes a book to exclude us from the theme. But anyway, so I'll stop at that. But as I said, it's the theme. Therefore, in that sense, it is caste and history. And Rajni Kothari is among the very first who is saying that caste is not bad. Although he doesn't state it clearly that it's not just religious. He's saying that caste is like any identifiable marker through which you form pressure groups in electoral politics, right? So caste functions just like that, because as you know, earlier there was an insistence on the singularity of caste, and hence you don't know how many times I have been asked in Mexico, why do you say that India is a democracy when you have the caste system, right? So Rajni Kothari was, saying that caste is, yes, it is an important element, but you are looking for, elements through which you can form identities very easily and quickly, to act as pressure groups in any electoral politics democracy. And caste in India is something people can fall back on very easily. Again, draw upon, not fall back on, draw upon very easily. So caste in that sense for him, rather than being bad for Indian democracy, in fact, it had a different kind of democratizing effect. That was the important point, that, people are breaking out of what we think are their, caste barriers and caste frontiers to form alliances. And these alliances, therefore, have found reflection in electoral politics. If you think of representative government, which sociologists are saying now that just in terms of representation in politics, forget about whether there has been social equality, social justice, or economic inequality with equality, but just in terms of representation, there has been a widening of the people you dominate, who represent, let's say, different castes. But Rajni Kothari was saying it much before these people actually studied the results of elections and how many MPs and how many MLAs, are returned. So that's why Rajni Kothari remains very important. So first book, as I said, he was someone, very concerned, very engaged with, caste in politics and what it is. That's first book was 70. Second book, of course, you can understand when it comes out. The second round of debates, of course, the Mandal Commission, again, not when the report is submitted, but when it's, when the central government announces that it will be implemented. Right? So this article that I've given is the second round, and hence the rise of Dalits and the renewed debate on caste in the 1990s. Now your comments. Yes. Microphone, yes.
I'm more comfortable.
Okay. Okay.
The thing is,
then speak loudly so that everyone can hear.
Please, can you hear me? Along with the history of Sanskritization and Kshatriyization, isn't it also that the Britishers cemented the caste system in our society, from which also Gandhi benefited? coming out with the Bahujan articles, and mm, I somehow feel that was. I somehow feel that it was also the beginning of mm, the caste politics in India, and Gandhi was the person who started. I don't know.
Okay. Beginning we cannot say because so I'll just refer you to Shekhar Mukhopadhyay's works, and he says that the non-Shudra movement actually had begun even before the censuses were carried out. So it's not as if that the all these caste movements are the result only of censuses, but everyone agrees that the censuses and the numerical, demarcation of people along certain particular lines definitely solidified the, non-Brahman and non-caste movements. So you have to. So there was awareness amongst various people. What Bill Rami is saying in a different way. What is the notion of Hinduism? Not Hinduism, but Hindu dharma. Let's say that is there, which has gone through several changes, combinations, but layers and layers. But even so, there is some notion that exists, right? Which is why it becomes so. It's the same thing. It's not as if these people didn't think that they were different from the others, etc. But yes, what happens with, we have gone over it, what happens with not just the census and all the other surveys that are being carried out, policies are implemented on the basis of those classificatory categories. And that we have to always keep in mind that, it's not just the census are marking out, which caste or which religion has what percentage in the population. They're also marking out who should get what kind of representation in the very limited institutional reforms they are promising. Yes. So it is from there that majority minority idea, this entire notion, very powerful notion of the majority and the minority takes shape. And as I said, it's because of electoral politics, although it's extremely limited. It's introduced only in the local councils. It's not until 1970, the Parliamentary reforms, that you have the provinces getting some power. And it's only in 1935 that you have, let's say, in some sense, elections where other parties, Indian parties, as parties like the Congress Party or Fazlul Haq or the United Alliance in Punjab, the Unionist Party in Punjab, are actually coming to form governments. 1937, 1935, the Government of India Act. After that, the elections that take place. So 1937, as late as that. But even so, the idea of representation, keep that in mind. It is extremely important, and it's also the beginning of any kind of problems. Who represents whom? Prithvi was mentioning that you go down, 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 and you say you are not really, even if you are a native of Assam, but you are not really, a part of my community, and hence you cannot quite represent me the way that I can. But that happens gradually. What happens first, the non-Brahman movement is, or the idea of the the Bahujan comes from there. So first, Pule's attempt, as you know, is to bring together the Shudras and Ati-Shudras. The other interesting thing is the impact of the census operations, the importance it gives to the classificatory scheme of Varna. Even while we think and we say that it's just a reference scheme and it doesn't work that way, in ground reality, it's only caste in several incarnations that works. He is using the term Shudra and Ati Shudra. So he's trying to bring together the Shudras, of course, a very large category of Shudras, along with the Ati Shudras, who are the untouchables. So it's Ambedkar who would come and say, the difference, the real difference is between the touchables and the untouchables. So he's not buying, Pule's logic, although we often praise, Pule and this, that's how we construct a history. Ambedkar is saying very clearly that the real difference is between touchables and untouchables. And the other interesting thing was something I mentioned earlier this morning. He's also saying that it's not this is against Gandhi very clearly when Gandhi supports the Varnashram Dharma as an organic division, right, of society. So he's saying it's not a division of labor, it's a division of laborers, meaning you are assigning who is doing what. And he doesn't put the question directly to Gandhi, but we should ask ourselves whether that is a saying. So who decided that the Brahmins would be only teachers and priests, and we will only do the worst kind of work available which no one else wants to do? No? What is the answer to that? Right? But what happens with the censuses and institutional politics together, the awareness that that had taken roots earlier, as that scholars from any region would say that it's not as if non-Brahmin movements wouldn't have happened, probably because the Namasudras definitely had formed their own association, etc., etc. But the form it takes, you're right there, the form it takes is absolutely tied to colonial policies. And the meaning and significance that caste acquires, even as I said, these are categories that acquire particular meanings and significance upon several other contingent factors and processes. That is entirely tied, as I said, to the colonial, not just classification, but the promise of institutional reforms and how these are implemented. Why are people reacting? Why do they want to be returned as a different caste in the next census? Because recruitment is based on that. We shouldn't forget that. So it's not as if they just want to, rise up in the caste hierarchy. There's a very real factor. If you belong to such a caste, you will not get recruited in the colonial army or in the administrative service. All kinds of factors. So yes, with Gandhi, you could say, I don't know, it could have gone both ways. Right? Even the people who have worked, like Eleanor said it, and the untouchables themselves, that Gandhi for the first time actually made it a visible national problem. Whatever are other problems with his formulation, prior to him, it was actually laughed at even by the Bengali leaders. We speak so highly of a Bengali leader. I'm not speaking of Subhash Bose or C.R. Das, not them, but several others. It's like, why untouchability? What's that got to do with? If you think of the Congress line that we only negotiate along political lines for greater inclusion of Indians, etc., etc. So how does untouchability fit in with that? And Gandhi, as he was thought of as this total kind of, what should I say, idiosyncratic guy when he joined the National Congress for the first few years. It's not before, it's only after non-cooperation and the tremendous effect he has that they started being taken seriously. But yes, he does that. And then, I don't know, Ambedkar would have happened even without Gandhi being there. I don't think Ambedkar, it's only reaction to Gandhi. I wouldn't buy at all. Yeah. No, I know. Yes.
As I'm following the politics of Purulia and Jharkhand, which is linked to my research, one thing I noted, which is very, connected to these readings, is the history of Mahatos. So when the Mahatos initially came into picture due to this Sanskritization and this Kshatriyization, they claimed to be Kshatriyas and they opted out to be this part of SC or ST for that matter. But now there are Mahato, political leaders. They have been trying for years to get, the surname under, scheduled tribe. As Mahato, the origins are from Santalis, actually. Yeah, if you look at that. So this is one very pertinent example
Yes,
to what we are talking about. Another thing is I want to mention a book I read recently.
Yes.
It's called The Adivasi Will Not Dance, and it's by Hasta Shorendra Shekhar. So he also talks about the perspective of a person who belongs to a very lower caste and who's also called an Adivasi, and their understanding of riots. It's a collection of short stories, but it's a perspective of an Adivasi and their understanding of riots, of daily living, and of jobs, and also the workplaces, and also about resistance, the way we look at it. So I really suggest guys to look at those.
Yes, thank you. More comments, criticisms, reactions on the readings. Yes, you want to say something? Diva, Abhishek? Anyone else? Someone who hasn't really spoken that much? No? Pratik? Any thoughts? Any idea? You can also engage with the readings, as I said, no? If you had the time to go through them. Yeah. Sorry?
Nothing comes to mind right now.
Okay, fine. Yes.
Apart from the census thing, that totally solidified the caste identity, I think there were scholars as well, like who solidified the caste identity. Was M.N. Srinivasan, that he mostly talked about Sanskritization. Anyway, he confirmed the caste like hierarchy, that Brahmins are at the top of the hierarchy. So in a way, he confirmed it. Sanskritization means like that people, like tribal population, the communities who are outside the Varna system, they tend to Sanskritize just to be at the higher position.
And there's also this notion of the tribe caste continuum.
Yes, tribe caste continuum. And even talking about, you have mentioned about Redfield, great tradition and music tradition. So in a way, like the last few lectures we have talked about the dichotomy of like which we have to prevent. But in a way, Robert Redfield also he have placed a dichotomy, that great tradition and little tradition. And those traditions, I think, the most of the scholars at that time, anthropologists, follow M.N. Srinivasan and even Redfield. So in a way, an array of literature was produced on having that notion of like, okay, this dichotomy was concretized, and Brahminical Brahman's position at the top of the system was placed.
You have to link it, as Vibha was saying, with the theories that were important, structuralism or functionalism. So how do you understand a system, what they thought of as a system, through the structure or through the function? And yeah, that also has. But yes, I agree. And the other thing I wanted to say about Rajni Kothari is why is the second round of debates? The second round of debates is also happening with lower caste and Dalit assertion, but again the very strident kind of idea of Hindu nation is coming into force. So that's the backlash, and that's the lack of dialogue, and that's the lack of comprehension even of. But you can connect the two together very easily.
Even Rajni Kothari talks about the consciousness that the Brahmins were like beforehand too conscious about their cultural, caste identity. But in the recent and in the political scenario, it has turned upside down. The Dalits are conscious about their caste identity, because in the electoral politics, that caste identity plays a major role.
Yes, and not just that, it also, Rajni Kothari doesn't say, other scholars have said that the Dalit assertion and low caste assertion has turned, Sanskritization on its head completely, because you are insisting on your backwardness.
So that backwardness has.
It has all kinds of problems, and Upendra Bakshi has called it, the investment in backwardness. But he doesn't want to dismiss it. He's saying we have to understand And what we have to understand now, again, the scenario has changed. Is why if you think of Rajiv Goswami setting himself on fire, we have to understand this regional the variations also. It's very when we say pay attention to the context. See, with Nehru and for several years, the public sector remained extremely important. We forget that completely. Why so much about now? It's not that much of an issue. Public sector was extremely important, and in Bihar even more so than in many other regions. Okay, so when the central government says that we are going to extend the quota limit to the maximum possible, it seems like 49%. It comes as a threat. Why does it come as a threat? Because we forget, when we think of the quota, we often forget that we, let's say the upper classes and castes, we do not form more than 20% of the population. Right? So even if this completely amorphous, other backward classes, actually the most, strident or the most passionate struggle has been waged more against the other backward classes, and not so much the Dalits, because I said because of Ambedkar because the long history of struggle, and when he tries to convert, the same policy of reservation into what he called an instrument for guaranteeing social justice, it was accepted. Which is why we start on the premise of liberal equality, but accepting that conditions are not equal. So we have to, create conditions that are more or less equal, so that at some stage we can guarantee what we will call substantive equality. Right? So that is more the other backward classes. But when what we forget then, again, how numbers play up in very different ways, and we were speaking of cartographies and configurations, then the V of 20% suddenly becomes the V of, let's say, 80%. And we think that, if 50% goes away, then obviously it's a very real threat that, our children will not get into any good schools or colleges, and they'll not get jobs and stuff. So, as I said, rightly or wrongly, but these people, fighting against reservation, for them it's very real, the fear. Why? Because these are the blind spots which, they'll probably never see, because the fear becomes extremely real then. Yes. Sure.
Well, first and foremost, I'm sorry that I haven't read your article, but then I've been following the discussions, and this whole idea that caste movement is primarily about the jobs. I mean, it is, but I think there are large issues at stake.
Yeah.
And I think this whole idea of this 20% taking hold over almost 90%, and then now having to recede, I think that is where the heartburn is. And that is where the upper caste women of LSR and stuff said that whom are we going to marry? During the Mandal Commission days, they had placards, and Uma Chakravarti has written about it. They had placards saying, whom are we going to marry? So, that's the kind of thing. So, and if we say that, caste is not there, or we are better off and things like that, I will ask all of you, whichever communities you belong to, look at the matrimonial columns.
Yes.
Everybody asks me to marry, and then one day I did look it up, and I was like, my goodness, I didn't even know this kind of subcaste. I don't even know that these things exist. So I think caste is very much there, and it is not only about jobs, it's about many, many more things.
Absolutely.
And I think worse things than unemployment. Like, I got a call, I do belong to the SC category, and I got a call when I was doing my orientation program in Jamia. And a lady called me saying that, sir, we have got to know that you belong to the SC category. We are building a flat complex, particularly for the SC/ST community. Are you interested? So now there are housing complex being made for these communities. How these people got to know, because this is in Guwahati. And none of my iCards are from Guwahati. I am not at all related to Guwahati. I live in Shillong. I am born in Calcutta. I was educated in Delhi. But then this kind of things also happen. Some kind of ghettoization. I don't know, all kinds of things happen.
Yes.
And I still read Times of India and things like that, and there are lynching happening. And an incident happened in Una recently where Dalit men were beaten up because I don't know for what reason. And then there was this uprising also, the recent Una incidents. So I think to pinpoint the whole fact about there are jobs to be had in the next batch of recruitment, I think this is the anxiety most probably of the upper castes, because they think that our jobs will be taken. For the lower castes, I guess it is primarily, of course, about jobs and access to wealth and resources, but also about dignity, also about participating in the polity which we were always excluded and thought to be always already excluded. Because if you look at the arrangement of the villages, the lower castes would have a separate area assigned to them. And those are not the important parts. The well is not there, the ponds are not there. And those are the bad parts and things like that. So I think to pinpoint the job issue is yes, but that is, I think, more from the perspective of the lower caste. The upper caste.
Absolutely, I
not
couldn't
from the
agree
lower.
more. No, but that's what I was saying. That's why I said that it was not just the sense that it had started before, and it is very much part of the dignity. The Dalit, category being taken over from depressed caste, which is absolutely a colonial category, and given new meaning and significance. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think I say it also in the introduction very clearly. Why was I talking about that? The importance of the public sector and the importance of the state. I would take the criticism a little further. On the one hand, the problem is because of this idea of state-centered or state-guided development or state-guided socialism, state-guided redistribution of resources, not just jobs, in the sense of, in the form of social resources. See, dignity is a key word, which is why I said that justice is number one, comes even before equality in the preamble to the Constitution. So my reading is that the framers, of course, with huge debates, you should read the Constituent Assembly debates. That will actually give you real insights into the very many different ways people thought of India and so forget about Hinduism, how people thought, their country is and country, should be, etc., etc. Constituent Assembly debates about language, about everything. But the idea, my reading entirely, is that they agreed on a point that, economic equality would be virtually impossible to guarantee. Yes. But why Ambedkar's trace, which they took over on education, for very different reasons, let's say Nehru and Ambedkar, they thought through education on the one hand and employment, and on the other hand through political power, like proper political representation, they will acquire a social status that will give them dignity. That's my reading. Hasn't happened. In fact, it's gone the other way, as you say. It's like threatened, rightly or wrongly, it has generated a fear. And, now the openness with which people can say, yes, I'm a Brahmin and I do this, I do that, it was not. And that's what Bill Brahmi was pointing to. It was not there in the India that even I grew up in. You know what I mean? It's like, and I write it in the preface to when we were joining Calcutta University, we had to note down our caste. All of us in a group said, how dare they, ask about our caste in an independent Indian state, right? It's much later when I came to write that I realized that they wanted to know about our caste precisely for, the reservation thing to function. But it was again our privilege to say, how dare they ask about our caste? But we thought we, conducted a social revolution by, all striking out that particular block, right? Tiny little square that you had. None of us reported our caste, and we were so thrilled, that morning after we filled out our forms. Because again, it was the same idea that why should caste matter? You see, and we have to pay respect to that point of view when we say that, all these people, the earlier generation, they were complacent. They actually felt, maybe it's a very small elite group, but we all felt, why should it matter? And how dare, the University of Calcutta, Heart of West Bengal, why are they asking us these questions?
No, I think this whole idea that caste does not matter, I think It's only the upper caste can say that caste does not matter, because for the people who are lower down in the hierarchy, caste matters because it restricts or enables you to be mobile. It restricts your educational opportunities. It restricts everything in some way. But then coming back to the other point, you began with that caste is fluid, something like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Now, when I went for orientation, and I'm not a scholar on caste, okay, something that I don't work on, but this is a scholar, he was a historian again from Jamia, I forgot his name, but he was also saying that the English categories of caste included very fluid things. Like Bengalis in United Province was regarded as a caste.
Yes.
And then there were very weird things which are not actually caste, like Bengalis can't be caste. And there were some professions which are performed by many castes and things like that.
Yeah.
So the categories were not very proper, as we say. But then when we say that caste is fluid and it is changing, I mean, how does it work? In the sense, I'm asking you a question, like, how does it work? Because people, you're born in a caste, and it restricts your everything. I mean, whom you're going to get married, how much you're going to study, or at all study or not, and things like that. So how do we say that it is fluid? I mean, in what sense?
See, I'm glad that you're coming up with this, because in Germany, again, there was a Dalit conference, and Sanal Mohan, maybe you know him.
Yeah.
And again, he was saying that you cannot say that doesn't matter, because, if you are born a Dalit, you know from the time you're a child that you are a Dalit. I said, I absolutely wouldn't agree more, Sanal. But the fact that you have actually, had access to good education, and you are, a professor of a university, you are sitting at, an international forum with us, that hasn't that, changed? Haven't you yourself evolved as a person, and so that you reflect on, even if it was extremely, let's say, and I put the same question to you, that maybe it was even derogatory, it was some kind of, let's say, indirect violence which you couldn't pinpoint, but you felt because of where. Do you really feel that you experience it, the atrocity, the same way now? This is a question Sanal couldn't answer.
You see, I think whether one experiences violence in a certain way, the structural violence of the caste hierarchies also depends on one's economic condition. Yes, the state did enable a very few people, and this could be interpreted as a co-option, because the reservation system cannot enable everyone.
No.
It is not meant to. It is meant to give a space to a few people who then, then the community would feel represented in state,
Absolutely.
access to state resources rather. Now the point is that's a very few, because for one like me, there will be hundreds like the downtrodden Dalits. Like if for in my instance, like very specific personal instance, like none of my cousins have had any degree whatsoever. Well, I have gone all the way to JNU, and yeah, of course, I mean those kind of things, yes, which is associated with some kind of pride and also, I guess, privilege. So yes, but then there are thousands, and the state does not have a mechanism to address that inequality. And I think it works for the upper caste also. I'm sure there are many
That's the counter argument.
poor upper castes, and the state has no way to redress the poverty. I mean, it cannot. Well, coming back to the point, the state is enabling, but it is also enabling in a very minuscule fashion. So I think that's where electoral politics comes into play, and the sense of dignity and things like that. So that's I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is the kind of things that people say that, when Mayavati, and she is not a epitome of a good leader. I mean, she is corrupt and all of that. But the very fact that a Dalit woman could sit in the chair of a chief minister with all these upper caste IPS, IAS officers meant a lot. It meant a symbolic change, and which I think, in spite of all the corruption and the Hathi statues, parks, and everything, it meant a lot for the Dalits.
That's precisely what I'm saying. When I said that it went wrong because there's tremendous, we haven't managed to generate, alternatives, several alternatives. So unfortunately, which I also point to, the entire thing has come to be focused around the state and what the state can or cannot give. And what Saran and I point to this, these all very much earlier traditions of anti-caste thought, let's say, and action. We have almost forgotten them. Do the Mayavadarmis matter? No. Do the Satnamis matter? No. But they also, in their own ways, what were they wanting? Precisely dignity, a sense of dignity by reconstituting the self in certain ways. That's the sad part of it. But on the other hand, given the condition of India, no, I don't think it's possible for any state to guarantee, but what you said about Mayavati, that is what, Jaffar's point is about how at least the political part of the reservation thing has worked. He calls it a silent revolution. And that's what he's saying. The number of, as I said, MPs, MLAs, and leaders, in the overall scenario of the country, where, backward classes, OBCs, and Dalits now feature, there's been what he thinks a revolutionary change, because it has increased a lot.
But the presence of one Mayavati or a person like me, does not make caste fluid. That's the, how do you come?
It is fluid. Isn't it fluid? Think of how the alliances in Bihar, not the Bihar of now, the Bihar of a few years ago. What is Bahujan Samaj? What isn't it a grouping? What is the Kisan and the let's say the earlier Janta government? Isn't it coming together constantly in very different ways?
Yeah, but those are the exigencies of electoral politics. But then, I'm still not sure about the fluidity of the caste. As in, if I'm born in a particular caste, I remain
there. No, you can also change. There are all these jokes in Calcutta about how the castes of Calcutta can never be trusted because they came from everywhere. And in UP also I've heard certain, and the same about UP castes and all that. So yes, there were people who could change, and there was a time when all it required was an affidavit, and there were all these jokes even about Rani Rashmuni's family. So and so became this, so and so became that, and how is it that we just remain a koi borto and koi borto, the same koi bortos. So
yeah, I know their surname is Mar, and they don't want to acknowledge that.
Yes. So it has been true, and that's even earlier. Kings could confer on you. So yes, so it's always been true, also in that sense. And through the electoral politics, the constant permutation, combinations that's going on. And as I said, in your own life, that's why I asked you the question. Because it's something I'll never have the answer to it, because I haven't been through that, experience of atrocity, let's say. And I'll never be able to go through that, right? That's why I asked you, and that's why I asked Salman.
Class amelioration, anyway.
Okay. Yes.
What I was thinking is, if government is actually trying to, if the primary purpose of this policy making reservation is to, empower the lower caste people, and can we actually think of, say, not saying that these people are Dalits, these people are Shudras and all, can our government or state policies and authorities think of, say, making these policies and reservations function not along the caste lines, but on the basis of, say, economic status? Simple, say, what are the pitfalls, or say, if the sole aim is to empower them, so why do we, say, call him Dalit, or we just divide people on the basis of the economic status and social status? So if we bring in social status, I think again we'll have problems. Say, in a particular region, what happens is, say, we have friends, there are people who comes from Brahman community and they need actually economic empowerment and things, and the fact that they come from Brahmin community, there is no place in the reservation and other things. So if the reservation and policies were based on only, say, economic status, will it, I mean, do anything good?
It will not
Is
do
it-
anything good because because the number of people who are poor. The point is, first we shouldn't confuse. As I said, democracy does not accept economic equality as one of its principles. Huh? Not capitalist democracies. So I think this is the slip we always make. Second, the point, as I said, that these people were thought to be backward socially, not just economically, socially backward, because they had been discriminated against for a very long time.
But again, doesn't this mean that we are agreeing to perpetuate this whole caste system in a way? See, if I come from SC community and I actually reach the higher status and all, I always remain SC person from SC community. So after a period, maybe this particular group of people did not, I mean, they have acquired a certain amount of social status and all, they may not be needing all these state protections and reservations. So this whole caste system, I was just wondering, aren't we agreeing in a way that the leads will always be the leads, they'll always remain so. Brahmins will be Brahmins. And when Sir was actually talking about, say, how a Brahman would, feel and think that caste system is actually fluid, because in a way, for me, this does not function. I mean, Brahman, he remains, you are general candidate, he always remains so. And when you belong to this reserved one, you always remain so. I mean, it's just a layman's question. I don't know. Say, in my place, I have this IAS officers, and they come from SC community, and their children, they also honestly say, when we discuss, no, that we don't need it anymore. But when they go for an interview, if they get 40 out of 100, they get recruited. I mean, I don't know, in some way we are agreeing. I mean, if we just say that this community, I don't know what will be the feeling of a Dalit once the state says that there are no Dalits in my state. That is really a big issue.
If you ask the Dalits, they'll say that they feel, in spite of getting the benefits, they feel discriminated against because there's this tremendous kind of prejudice against quota candidates. So, for me, the question is, first, we always forget that reservation was introduced as a temporary measure for 10 years. And the framers of the Constitution were extremely hopeful, I must say, overtly, expectant, impossible, because they thought, by granting special benefits to the underprivileged or discriminated against groups for 10 years. Remember, I said the starting point was conditions are not equal. So they thought conditions will become equal. That's what I'm saying. That was a very foolish hope. But the point then is to ask ourselves, I agree with you, ask ourselves, why has it gone awry so completely? Right? Why has it been extended continually? Why has been, there been greater assertion, let's say, on the behalf of, let's say, of, greater investment, let's say, backwardness? And why has it created this tremendous prejudice also? Again, not just communal is a technical pejorative term in India. Forward caste, backward caste. Doesn't make sense to anyone else, outside, any English speaking world, you just say forward caste. I belong to a forward caste. I mean, it draws a total blank. Okay. Untouchable, for example, in Mexico, or again, anywhere else. The untouchables are like the highest, the ones who cannot be seen, the old Spanish descendants who somehow still control a lot of prestige, and well, they are the untouchables because they cannot be touched, because they cannot be seen. And yes, so I think we have to ask ourselves, I agree. But you think there would come a stage when I say that, I give up my privileges as a Brahman, and I'm willing to do any kind of work, that I'll go down to the level of scavenging? No, I'm sorry. That I'm willing to marry my daughter to a sweeper? We have to ask ourselves all these questions. It has to come from both sides. It's only then we'll say that, no, we don't believe in caste. Right? If I'm a very poor Brahman, okay, fine. Maybe I live by doing something that I'm not meant to do. Then be ready to marry my son and daughter to somebody who does the same job, not thinking about caste at all. You see, these are the questions we will never ask, unfortunately. I don't know for, I don't see it happening in my lifetime, but let's see. Yeah. Viva. Sorry. No, I thought you had, okay, I think we are kind of overshooting, no? But I'm very glad that we are having this discussion. I've thought about it, and I often feel discriminated against in the sense of like, we have a double barrel, Brahman name. How dare you open your mouth in a Dalit conference, right? Yes, that also happens. I'm not saying, and this is about frontier building, creating constantly the, internal other, external other, you are an outsider, the native point of view. You weren't doing that at all, nor was Sanal doing that. No, but there were people saying in Germany that, we should have more Dalits in a conference on Dalits. And not just Brahmins, not forget the Brahmins, and internal experts speaking on.
International experts. Nodding primarily to the controversy related to Arundhati Roy's as the introducer in the Navayana edition of Annihilation of Father. That's why I was.
I agree, but I'm not. At times I find Navayana and all that. As I said, the born again Dalits, the Brahmins who think they are Dalits now. I find it a little too. Yeah. So anything that's too screaming, then again I said there's no scope for dialogue. Sorry, what were you going to say? Yes.
Does it mean we started off wrong? I don't know. When we were actually thinking about this empowerment, wasn't it possible for us to say, we do not name them as Dalits? Say, in my country we have poor people, we have middle class people, these people need preservation, they need protection, they need preservation. I mean, was it very difficult for us to conceive of a project or thing like this?
See, it didn't start with independence, unfortunately. The point is, it has a very long history to it, right? Caste system, it didn't start with Dalits, suddenly didn't become Dalits, in the 20th century, right? And untouchability has functioned in very different ways in very different regions. I agree. But that doesn't mean that, Bengal, we always say, no, untouchability has never been a problem in Bengal. Ask someone who's, as he's saying, ask someone who was born there. Maybe, as I said, even I was surprised when I went to Odisha in the early 1990s, end 80s, early 1990s, that, when I had to go and find a Mahima Dhati who was from, they were still using Harija. This tells you how, how they cut off they are from Dalit politics and all that. So, you have to go to Harijan Pada. And I was quite struck because in Bengal I hadn't seen that, honestly, right? The Harijans living outside the village. So that's the Bengal I don't know, that's what I'm saying. When I saw it in Orissa, I was really struck that, even in the early 1990s, I am actually having to go out of the village and take a rickshaw to go to the Harijan Pada to meet the Mahima Dharmis, and they have become Mahima Dharmis, obviously, but they remained Harijan in that sense. Yeah?
I just don't want to keep on harping on the same thing, but the point about representation we are talking about, there's having more Dalits in a Dalit conference and this whole idea, there's a whole lot of things about this. But the point is, and there are more women in this room, and how would all the women feel about a man, editing a feminist studies book, and then, all male scholars. It won't be a very nice thing. So, but then that doesn't mean that, people say that Kancha Ilaya is OBC, so he shouldn't work on Dalit issues and all. I know it's absolutely absurd and nonsense. But the point is, there has to be some representation and maybe...
enough representation.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind inviting, like if it's a volume of, 11 contributors, it could be 5 and 6 either way. I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
male can be feminist.
No, male, as and when men will become feminist, I think it will become more gender sensitive society. But the point is not that. The point is about editing and, writing about women and only men. So that's it.
And you didn't invite us to the town because we were girls, right?
Oh, come on. That was a joke. And I didn't say that.
See, what do I mean? You know, we inhabit contradictions. The point is to stop and reflect on them from time to time. We all are made up of contradictions. There's absolutely nothing wrong in that. The point is to be aware of it so that maybe we, you know, as I said, we behave in slightly different ways, right?
But women in
Yes.
India also, like feminism was like first, the concept of feminism was first started by the men only. Raja Rammohn, you are
I won't call him a feminist, I'm sorry.
yeah.
Not even by a long shot, I'm sorry.
Didn't he marry more than once?
Sorry?
Ramon, I think he married more than once.
That doesn't make him a feminist or not feminist, I'm sorry. All our feminist men and women are, you know, into making and breaking relations. They don't even believe in, you know, long-term relationships. So let's not go into that.
But if you're talking about that period, you know.
And let's not record all this, sorry. Sorry, but thank you very much. We'll take a 5-minute break, and that was precisely the point. You know, we have to talk about the problems facing. We take the problems that face us in our everyday lives in the India of today, right? Otherwise, do we want a 5-minute break, Abhishek? Do we need a 5-minute break, or we just carry on? The majority rules, consensus.
You get 5 minutes to reach the
The 5 minutes will be too short. Yeah. No, I just thought if someone wants to take, you know, step out and get a breath of fresh air and then come back. That's all.
We could use that table as our discussion table.
You want to do that?
Luckily, they can bring
Stop.
The moment you
That's
prefer.
what we recorded. I mean,
No, we don't want to. No. I've said no to the recording anyway. So.